Cool.
You are
Bananas.
live.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Pawz People. I am Retha.
Hi, everyone. I'm Antonette, and I'm so glad that you guys have joined us this evening. Make sure you drop a hello and tell us where you're watching from. And then also remember to put your questions for our guest.
Tonight, we are asking one big question, 3 different ways, and that is basically, are we accidentally giving our dogs too much of a good thing? Too many shots, too much processed food, or too many toxins? Our grandparents have never had to think about these things.
Yeah, and we're very lucky tonight. We couldn't have asked for a better guide. So our guest tonight is one of the most respected holistic veterinarians in the world, author, educator, a voice millions of dog owners trust. And it is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Judy Morgan.
Hi.
Oh, it's
Hi,
so
Dr.
lovely to have you
Judy.
here.
I'm happy to be here.
So I think before we dive in, Dr. Judy, I think let's just set the tone here for our guests. Guys, it's about questioning. It's not about shaming or judging you. So please, let's ask the questions, because I think it's important that we start and ask the right questions so that we all can get on the same page. So Antoinette, I think you can fire away and you can ask the first question.
Must I ask the first question? All right. Shall we start with the easy one, vaccines? Dr. Judy, should I just say vaccines and then go?
Well, I'm not sure what the vaccine protocols are in South Africa, but they're not so great here in America. For years, the veterinary contingency, the conventional group, has advocated for all vaccines every year for all animals. And that is a really bad way to approach it. Way back in the 1990s, Ron Schultz started doing the work in immunology to look at the core vaccines and said, hey, wait a minute, why are we giving these every year? We know that distemper, parvo, hepatitis, rabies, they're pretty long lasting. And look at this, we can test these dogs and cats and we can find that they still have good protective antibody levels years down the road from being given these vaccines. Why are we doing it every single year? But the conventional veterinary group said, well, how are we going to make money? How are we going to get people to come in the door every year if we don't send them a card that says your dog's due for shots? And that's kind of the way it was. I mean, when I graduated, it was every year. And you send out the card every year to get people in. And when I started, thinking in a more holistic manner and started changing my practice over to that, I did research on the subject and found that even once we started saying, hey, these last a lot longer, the majority of veterinarians were still pushing annual vaccinations. And they said, well, we just won't be able to get people in the door. And as a pet owner, if you got a card in the mail that says, hey, Fluffy is due for a physical exam and maybe some lab work, you might look at your dog and say, well, he's only 4 years old, looks healthy to me, runs around, he eats, he sleeps, he poops, he drinks, looks good. And you're less likely to go in if there's not that call to action of he needs his shots. And so, I mean, the veterinarians might have been right in saying, well, we don't think people will come in if we don't say they're due for shots. But that's really just an education problem. It's educating your clients to understand that that physical exam is worth its weight in gold. And being proactive with lab work and looking at kidney function, liver function, that's worth its weight in gold too. So that's why we do what we do at Naturally Healthy Pets. It's all about education and empowering the pet owner to make decisions. So I'm a huge fan of titers.
So we in South Africa, it's still the yearly thing. Yearly is I mean, even if the little pamphlet inside the vaccine says every 3 years, our vets still say you need to do it every year. And a lot of vets does not even blink at looking at titers. Titers in South Africa is also not yet a big thing. It's starting to get, some vets does start doing it. But yeah, it is a little bit of a problem. I'm a big fan about titer.
Yeah, it's a huge problem here. A lot of traditional veterinarians do not want to do titers. It takes longer to pull blood. It takes longer to send it out. It's more work. You need more hands. And so what they do is they just tell people, oh, it's going to be $500 to run a titer or $49 for the vaccine. And, most people don't have an extra $500 running around right now. So they're like, oh, okay, go ahead and vaccinate them. And we also have the issue of boarding, grooming, daycare, anywhere where you take your dog in a group situation. We haven't done enough education with the owners of those facilities to get them to accept titers, to get them to recommend titers. I stopped taking my dogs to the groomer. I learned how to groom my own dogs because I'm not going to show up with a piece of paper with 15 vaccines on it that my dogs were given in order to go get a haircut. It seems kind of silly. So I just learned how to do it myself. And when we travel, my mom lives with us. So if she's not traveling with us, she takes care of the dogs. And if she's going with us, somebody else comes and stays at our house. Because again, I'm not going to over-vaccinate my dogs as a convenience for me or somebody else. I'm going to jump through whatever hoops it takes and not to have to do that. But we're also really stuck with a lot of veterinary practices. The traditional ones will say, oh, we won't treat your animal. We won't see your animal if it's not up to date on its vaccines. Most of them are saying that about rabies, but there are others who are saying, oh no, we won't see your animal if it's not up to date on distemper, hepatitis, parvo, kennel cough, rabies, and they give you the laundry list. And it's like, I'm not going to do all of that. And by the way, my pet's overdue for all those vaccines. So in order to get them up to date on those vaccines, you're going to have to see him as an unvaccinated animal to get the vaccines. So instead of coming in for you to see him to get the vaccines, why don't I just bring him in so you can look at the problem that we have? But they won't do it. I mean, it's just, it's pretzel logic.
It is exactly. I've had a little issue with one of my dogs, and he had meningitis, and they wanted to give the fact that he's not vaccinated.
So vaccinating a dog with meningitis is really an oxymoron because that's a dog whose immune system is already totally messed up. He's having an autoimmune awful reaction. And if we stimulate that immune system more by giving vaccines, oh my gosh, we've just made a terrible mess. We've taken a terrible mess and made it worse.
The great thing was when I said to them, please do a spinal tap and then test. They came back and said his immunity is quite strong with the stuff that they thought was causing the meningitis. So I'm quite verbal about this because I do titers and I'm prepared to pay for it, and I do it just as a hobby to prove vets. No, I'm not against that, to prove them wrong and that it is necessary. So how please explain to our listeners what is titer testing?
So we do a blood test and send it out to a lab. There actually are in-house test kits that they could use, but most people send them to a lab. And what they're looking for is antibodies to certain diseases. So if you do a titer for parvo, they are looking to see if parvovirus antibodies exist in the blood. And so our immune system is made up of white blood cells and proteins in the bloodstream. And so they can look at specific diseases. So we have titers available for distemper, parvo, hepatitis, and rabies. There are no titer, like we can do a leptospirosis titer, but the leptospirosis titer is looking to see if they're sick, not if they have antibodies from a vaccine. So we don't bother doing that one. It's not going to tell us whether or not to vaccinate. but we can look at those other core diseases. Now, I don't know about in South Africa, but in the United States, rabies is mandatory pretty much everywhere. And it's mandatory every 3 years. So the first vaccine is only good for a year, and then it's mandatory every 3 years after that. And dogs have to be licensed. Cats only have to be licensed in a very few municipalities, so it's not as big a deal, which is kind of weird because a lot of the rabies in this country is stray cats, stray kittens. And then depending on which part of the country you're in, the rabies may be a bat strain, maybe a raccoon strain, maybe a fox strain. So when I lived up in New Jersey in the Northeast, it was raccoon was the problem. Now I'm in the Southeast in North Carolina, and fox is the problem. And if you go to the western part of the US, bats are the problem. And so it's different in different regions. And I get it. You know, rabies is something, if you get bitten by a rabid animal, you're probably going to die. I've been bitten by a rabid kitten. It was no fun. I had to get a series of 7 vaccines. It's fine. It worked fine. I'm still here. But it's not fun. And, you know, you don't want to die. And people in third world countries die from rabies all the time by the thousands. And it's because they don't have good rabies vaccine protocols. They have a lot of stray animals, and people are not as well educated about, hey, I got bitten by a stray dog. Maybe I should go see a doctor. So it is a problem in some areas. In the US, it's so rare for somebody to die of rabies, like really rare. But, you know, we've had strong vaccine protocols for many years. The biggest problem is that they won't accept titers. So one of my dogs, I was considering taking her to Japan for heart surgery. In order to do that, she was going to have to get a series of 2 rabies vaccines. And she hadn't been vaccinated in about 8 years. So I thought, well, let me do a titer and at least see where her rabies titer is, so I know what my starting point is. And in this country, a rabies titer, anything over 0.5 is considered protective. She hadn't had a vaccine in 8 years and her titer level was 14. I said, she's pretty well protected. I don't think I need to get her more vaccines. And we opted not to go for heart surgery because I didn't want to give her 2 more vaccines. So, you know, there's a tough decision. Let's see, my dog can't have surgery because I don't want to give her 2 vaccines. Ended up being the right decision. But, you know, rabies is a problem. Leptospirosis is also zoonotic. I only diagnosed 4 lepto cases in 36 years of practice. It's not that common. It's not near as common as they want us to think. And I never had the people get sick dealing with a dog with lepto. And I never got sick from hospitalizing or handling dogs with lepto. So I think that one is definitely blown out of proportion. And then, you know, the media gets involved because Big Pharma says, oh, we saw 2 dogs with leptospirosis in this city. We should, you know, contact the media and tell them there's a lepto outbreak, and we should get them all to, you know, get everybody up in arms, just like they do with people. Let's get everybody up in arms. Oh my gosh, there's a big flu outbreak there, you know, whatever. And everybody needs to get vaccinated. Collusion.
Just a quick question, Dr. Judy. With the titer test, do you have to do it annually? And how, if not, yes or no?
It depends.
It depends. Okay. And then if a dog has got immunity, is that immunity for life?
We don't know. So in my practice, and remember, we started doing titers 25 years ago. In my practice, we would usually do them annually. First of all, I negotiated a good price with the lab, so I didn't charge a fortune to do titers. So it was probably double what the vaccine was, but it wasn't exorbitant. So people were like, oh, well, that makes sense. But a lot of times we did it annually because they needed annual proof for boarding, grooming, and daycare. If they didn't need proof for that, then we might go out 3 years or so. With my own dogs, I quit doing titers because I'm like, I don't take them anywhere. I don't need proof of anything. I'm good. So it depends on what are you doing with your pet? Who do you have to show proof to? If you don't need to show proof to anybody, like my dogs don't leave my farm. They are in their fenced, beautiful yard. They walk around the farm on leashes with us. If they're outside that yard, they're not exposed to other dogs. They're exposed to our farm animals, but they're not playing with wildlife. And there's no need for, like, I don't need to know. they're not exposed to anything, so it doesn't matter. So you really have to look at individually. What do you need to do with your pet? Do you travel with your pet? Do you go to group settings with your pet? Are you boarding them? What do you need to do? And what does your veterinarian require?
Yeah,
How
I've
that's
I've
a tricky
never
thing.
yeah, I've never been in a position where a vet has refused treatment in South
That's good.
Africa.
That's
But
good.
yeah, but then up until a few years ago, I used to follow the protocol, vaccinate every year. But now, once they hit about 6 years old, we just don't vaccinate anymore.
Yeah.
But we live on the farm, so, and the dogs they don't go to pet friendly places, so we stay at home.
My dogs are not user friendly in public places, so they just don't.
No.
They're small, and you would think they would be fine, but they are not, so they just don't go.
Yeah, no, it would be total chaos.
My beagles jump on all kinds of tables and begs, and it is crazy. I actually had a client whose dog had to be euthanized. And unfortunately, the vet that she contacted didn't want to do it unless they vaccinate the pet. So vaccinate the pet so that we can put it down.
Yeah,
It
I
makes
have one of those.
no sense to me.
Yeah, a client contacted me. She said, my dog is, ancient and has all these problems and I need to have it euthanized. And the vet won't see the dog unless it's up to date on vaccines. So she had to make an appointment on Friday to have the dog vaccinated for rabies so that she could make an appointment on Monday to have the dog euthanized. Now, the rabies vaccine didn't even take effect that fast. So that was just one of the most ridiculous scenarios. But we see this and it makes zero sense. It's the same as a veterinarian saying, well, your dog is coming in for a spay, a neuter, a dental cleaning, a mass removal, whatever. And the day that he comes in, he has to be up to date on vaccines. So we'll be happy to give the vaccines while he's here that day. What? Who are we protecting with that? Because it takes at least 2 weeks from the time you give the vaccine to have any protection at all. So all we're doing is taking an animal that's undergoing a stressful anesthetic procedure and overstimulating their immune system with a bunch of vaccines at the same time. It's not protecting the dog. It's not protecting other dogs that are there. It's not protecting the veterinarians and the staff. What are we doing?
So is it a money thing?
I don't know. Make it make sense. It's a rule thing. Oh, the rule in our clinic is they have to be up to date on vaccines to be in the hospital. And so I get this phone call every single time one of my dogs goes in for a dental. Hey, we noticed that Forrest is overdue for his rabies vaccine. We can give it while he's here today. And my answer is always, no, you cannot. We won't be doing that today. And this is something I would say to everyone. If you are dropping your dog off for the day at the vet, no matter what they're being dropped off for, usually you're going to have to sign an admission form and a consent for treatment. Read it very carefully and write in whatever is important to you. So I always write on there, no vaccines are to be given while my pet is here today. No flea and tick chemicals are to be placed on my pet. If you find a flea, you call me. And so whatever the instructions are, if they're going in for a dental, I write on there, no extractions without a phone call and permission from me first. So remember that you're in charge, you're your pet's advocate, and you need to be very specific. So if you are dropping them off to get x-rays done, find out, are they going to be giving sedation or are they going to do it without? One of my dogs needed an abdominal ultrasound. He had advanced heart disease and we were looking for cancer, which I knew he had. We just had to find it. And the guy that was there to do the ultrasound insisted on sedating the dog. And I said, no, we're not sedating this dog. He's got advanced heart disease and he's got cancer. No sedation. He would not do it. And I said, fine, my dog and I are going somewhere else. And that's being your pet's advocate. And I had to call a lot of places before I found someone who was willing to try it without sedation. I said, look, here's the deal. I'm going to bring him in. You get his ultrasound without sedation because he's just a sweet little marshmallow. He's, he doesn't care. I said, you're going to do it without sedation. And if you try and you waste your time and you can't do it, I'll pay you the full ultrasound fee of $600 because you were nice enough to try. And the vet that I found that agreed to it, when I took him in, she listened to his heart and she said, "Oh my God, I would never sedate this dog." I said, "No kidding." And she did it without sedation. And she said, "Oh my gosh, like who would want to sedate this dog?" I was like, well, that was my point. But the other guy never even looked at my dog, didn't listen to his heart. That was his rule. And so that's what we find. Like people just set these hard and fast rules and they won't flex and they won't be reasonable and use common sense. And so if you're dealing with someone who has that inflexible, no common sense attitude, you need to find somebody else.
Yeah.
So this is actually a very, very important question. Is a lot of people are too scared and too intimidated by the vet. So what would be a way for them to even start this conversation with it? How do you empower a pet parent to be a strong advocate for what they believe in?
Education. And so that's why we do what we do at Naturally Healthy Pets. That's why we have all of our social media, all of our books, our blogs, our courses. If you go in with tons of knowledge and you say, "No, I can show you studies that say, a titer shows protection for my dog. I can show you a study that says giving multiple vaccines at the same time is contraindicated. I can show you multiple studies that show that we don't need to give antibiotics when they have dental extractions, even if their mouth is rotten. I can show you a study." So if you can go in and say, "No, I've done the research. I understand. I have a good understanding of what I'm dealing with here. And this is my position," and you don't want to back them into a corner and make them get defensive, because then it's never good and you're never going to win. Because what they're trained in veterinary school, they're trained one way and they're told, "This is it. This is, my way or the highway." And so, sometimes when you're talking to them about something like raw feeding or using supplements, they have no training in that. And so they don't want to feel stupid. And so if you're giving them information that makes them feel like they're not as well educated on the conversation, sometimes that makes them be very defensive. But if you're coming at it from just the point of, "Look, I'm my pet's parent. I'm the advocate for this animal. I live with this animal. Like my dog, I knew he had cancer because of his dark brick red tongue. He was drinking more water. He was panting. I'm like, I know there's something bad in here. We're just going to go find it. I suspected it was in his bladder, but I knew that. And so it was up to me to say, "Look, I live with this dog every day. I see the changes. I know what's going on." It's a little easier for me because obviously I have training behind me. But that's why that education is so important for the pet parent, so that you're going in with very firm footing of, "No, I've researched this. I know that a titer test is going to show whether my dog has antibodies to this disease. And if he's got antibodies at a certain level to this disease, that means he's protected. And if he gets exposed, he's not going to get sick. By the way, I'm willing to take the responsibility for that. If my pet comes and spends the day at your hospital and you have a parvo dog here and my dog gets parvo, that's on me. I accept that responsibility." So, you just have to say, "Look, I'm responsible for this animal and it's all on me. The buck stops here." And, I just be very firm, but not really argumentative. Like there's a special art to doing that and not making them mad. And I've had vets that I've made mad, and, it's like, okay, we're not going to get along. We don't see eye to eye. You're not willing to be open-minded. Okay. We're either going to agree to disagree, or we're going to agree that I'm going somewhere else. And, that's hard for some people because, like, even in this country, we have food deserts, we have veterinary deserts where it's like, I have to drive 100 miles to get to any veterinarian, and this is the only choice I have. Otherwise, it's 200 miles. That's not a good place to be in. So you better figure out how to get along. And so sometimes if you can bring some of that, whether it's a book or research or whatever to back up, especially if you're asking for something a little weird. But if you can bring something to back up your position, it can be really helpful. And that's not that hard to do with the internet these days. You can find studies on just about anything. They might be able to find studies that say the opposite of whatever you're pushing, but that there's always two sides to every story. But we also have to look at, like, when I look at research, who paid for that research? Who was that study sponsored by? So, like, do you have heartworms over there?
Heartworm.
Yeah. Do you have heartworm?
It's very similar to Spiricalopi. We don't have heartworm like you do, but we've got something called Spiricalopi, which is something that goes into the heart and it's almost a death sentence to your pet. So if you don't catch it easily.
Okay. Yeah. So we have studies saying, there's resistance to all the normal heartworm preventatives or the parasite preventatives that we're using. And, it's become a big thing lately with, resistance. And so you have to use these new chemicals, which are neurotoxins. And I'm so against them. And when we look at the studies, it's like, who sponsored those studies? That would be the maker of the new drugs. That's who sponsored the study. That study's probably pretty skewed. Maybe we should find another study talking about this. So, you always have to look at where's the information coming from, who's pushing that information, who paid for that information, because it can really skew how things come across. And it's really interesting. I'm actually doing a presentation on this at the American Holistic Veterinary Medical Association in the fall. And it's right after your thing. They asked me to do a presentation on it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like when we look on the medical side, not the veterinary side, but over 50% of the articles that are in the British Veterinary or the British Medical Journal and the Lancet, over 50% of them are paid for by big pharma. And the editors that have quit have said, we're told what to publish and what we're not allowed to publish. And we're paid big bucks to publish things that pharma is sponsoring and is showing the results that they want to show. So you can't even trust what's in the medical journals. Everything is very skewed.
It's actually so scary if you think about it. Because there's a matter of good faith and good trust that you put into your veterinarian and into research and studies, and then all of a sudden you get this awakening and you realize, you need to go and have a look. Who paid for it? Where did it come from? And just ask a question about everything. But that is definitely part of what we are also trying to do, is to educate people to not just accept what is being said, and for our pets, for ourselves and our pets. So it's really very important to do.
Whatever is being prescribed for your pet, like, I don't know how you guys do pharmaceuticals over there, but when we pick up a human medicine at the pharmacy, we are given pages of paperwork that say, this is what the drug interacts with. These are the side effects to look for. Don't take it with grapefruit juice or whatever. And we're given pages of information about any drug that is being used by a human. When you go to the veterinary office, you're handed your little packet of pills and told, here, go give this. So it's really critical for you as the owner to question, are there any side effects associated with this drug? Does it interact with other drugs? Here are all the different things my dog is suffering with. My dog has IBD. My dog has cancer. My dog has Cushing's disease. My dog has arthritis. Is this going to be a problem for any of those diseases? How is this going to interact? And anytime that they say there are no side effects to a drug, it's a lie, because you can actually die from drinking too much water. So anything can have a side effect. And, the great thing is, I don't know about you guys over there, but here we all have these little mini computers we walk around with. So you can type into your search engine side effects of whatever the drug is in dogs or cats, whatever your pet is. You're going to find out what can happen. And then you need to question that. Then you say, well, This says he might get diarrhea from this. Have you seen that? How often do you see that? Is that a problem? What do I do if he gets diarrhea? So that you know what to watch for. It just makes good sense. And then if you are giving supplements or medications, it would be really nice to know if that's going to interact, or if you need to stop the supplement, or you need to stop the other medication. Like, what am I looking for? So it's really just a matter of education.
Yeah. And luckily now we do have access to the information, like you say, so we can confirm that this is the correct treatment. And the other thing that I think that happens is general treatment, and the people aren't looking at the dog in front of them and what they need.
Yeah.
So they just, like that rule you said, they have the rule, that's the rule, we stick to the rule. But what about the dog in front of you?
Exactly.
What are their needs?
Exactly. Yeah. Like my dog. All dogs get sedated for an ultrasound. Yeah, not this dog. He's not all dogs. He's this dog. And so you have to be that advocate who says, yeah, my dog is not the same as everybody else's dog. If you live in an apartment in a high rise in the city and your dog uses pee pads and never walks outside, that's kind of different from the farm dog or the hunting dog or the dog who travels a lot. Or the dog who goes to a dog park, or the dog who, you're that owner who goes to every fundraiser for shelter dogs. And so they're around a lot of shelter dogs. You have to look at your pet as an individual and say, okay, and this is the risk level I find acceptable. So I wouldn't take my dogs to a bunch of shelter dog functions. I might go to that function and raise money, but I'm not taking my dogs. There was a time when I had a group of very healthy dogs that did go to a lot of those kinds of events, and they were always just fine. They had their titers. Like, I knew what their exposure level was. So it's just a matter of standing up for what you believe in and, doing that research so that you can say, well, yeah, my dog isn't exposed to that. And I'm sure you have a lot of different diseases there that we don't have here. But, even for the heartworm thing here, there are some areas of the country where tick-borne diseases don't exist because there's no ticks. There are some areas where heartworm doesn't exist because there's no mosquitoes. And it's like, well, why would I put dogs in that area on flea and tick medications and heartworm medications? They have zero exposure. But the National Parasite Group for Veterinary Medicine says all dogs and cats get flea, tick, and heartworm medication every month, all year round, no matter where you live. Like, that makes no sense at all. All dogs will be vaccinated for Lyme disease, no matter where you live. I'm like, except we don't have Lyme disease in 10 states. Why?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense at all. So we're talking about what we inject in our dogs, what we put onto them, and etc. But Antonette, you can do this one, because what's really
Rita is very allergic to processed food. So,
as we should be.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What's the single worst thing in commercial food?
Well, it's funny because I looked at this question earlier, and Joey, my tech person who sets everything up for me, I said, oh, here's a good question. What's the single worst ingredient hiding in most commercial dog food? And I was just like, oh my gosh, it's such a long list that I don't even know where to start. And I just looked at him and I said, probably euthanasia solution, because, and again, I don't know what the food is like in your country, but I'm assuming that Mars and Purina are big sellers of food in South Africa as okay. And do you have Hill's Science Diet, Royal Canin, all that?
Science, yeah. And
okay.
it doesn't, some used to be made in South Africa, but now I think Royal Canin is withdrawn, and it's made in France, and then it gets shipped to South Africa. It gets shipped to South Africa, so it's 3 months on a ship before it gets here, type of thing, or 6 months. So you can just imagine.
They put enough preservatives in it that it's labeled as being good for 2 years, sometimes longer. But, and it's funny because it's not funny, but a Purina representative told Susan Thixton, whose website is truthaboutpetfood.com, great website.
Amazing website.
They told her that their dog food would last for 25 years. They had enough preservatives in it that it's good for 25 years. And the first time I was asked to speak at a public, I got paid to speak. We had like 50 people there. It was set up by a dog trainer. It never dawned on me to charge for speaking or to even be a speaker. So it kind of blew me away. And she said, well, I want you to come talk about pet food. And I was like, okay, fine. So I went to the grocery store and I bought all of the worst crappy food that I could find, like the molded burgers and in plastic wrap, like all the really crappy stuff. And then I went and I set it all up at the front of the room because I figured, this was going to be, your typical audience that doesn't know anything. What I found out is most of them were already raw feeders making their own food. And I was like, I just wasted a couple $100 on really crappy food that they already knew was crappy. So, yay. Well, then what do I do with all this food? Because I can't donate it to the shelter in good conscience. I'm like, there's no way I would feed this to any animal. So it sat in an upstairs office in my satellite clinic where it got very hot. It was usually like 100 degrees up there. And it was in my office for probably 10 years. It smelled so bad. Like it was still in the packaging and you could just smell the chemical. I'm really sensitive to chemical smells. You could just smell it oozing out of those packages. And, finally after 10 years, I was like, I need to just throw this away. It was so bad. Like there was no way I ever would have fed it to an animal. So the highly processed food, we've got, if it's got rendered meals in it, then it's going to have euthanasia solution. The head of the largest rendering association in the country here gave the keynote speech at the Association of Feed Control Officials maybe 10 years ago. And he said it's almost impossible to have a rendered product that doesn't have euthanasia solution in it because, oops, that one accidentally got in there. There was a lawsuit here in 2023 against Rachel Ray Nutrish dog food, which is ultra processed. And it's got all the rendered ingredients in it. And they tested the DNA and they had a lawsuit because it had horse DNA and dog DNA, which are not on the label as being part of the ingredients. Shocking. They just sort of snuck in there with all the other dead animals. So, but we also have all these preservatives in there, many of which are carcinogenic. They're not allowed in the human food industry anymore. They're not allowed in Europe, but they're allowed in America. Why? We have all the dyes, all the food dyes that are now being banned in America in human food, but they're allowed in pet food, which is really dumb because our dogs and cats don't care if the little bits in the food are green, brown, yellow, orange, red, and purple. They see dry brown balls and all they care about is, does it smell good? Does it taste good? And oh, by the way, the only reason it tastes good is because it's sprayed with palatants and addictive substances to make them want to keep coming back to it. There's so much bad stuff in ultra processed food. It's also cooked at really high heat. So we have advanced glycation end products, AGEs. They're carcinogenic. We have Maillard reaction that occurs, makes things carcinogenic. With all the grains and legumes that are in there, where do you think all the moldy stuff goes that's not fit for human consumption? Oh yeah, that goes to pet food. Okay, so the big train cars full of grains are fumigated. All right, now we've got that chemical in there. We killed off the molds, but when molds die, they release mold toxins. So some of our biggest recalls here, actually the biggest recall ever, was for aflatoxins, mold toxins in food, which our pets are extremely sensitive to. So if you're feeding ultra processed food, aka dry kibble that's been extruded, and your dog or cat has elevated liver enzymes on their testing, they're being exposed to aflatoxins. You need to get them off of that, detox them, clean up their liver, and hope that they survive that insult. It's a huge problem. And then we also had the problem, which was worldwide, with the excess of vitamin D from the vitamin mineral mix that's added back to these highly processed foods. Because they're so ultra processed, the nutrient levels have dropped so much, they have to add a synthetic vitamin mineral mix in. Well, oopsie, somebody made a miscalculation in the vitamin D levels, and they were way too high. And we had tens of thousands of animals that died from kidney failure from excess vitamin D in their food. And the problem with something like that, like in 2007, we had food tainted with melamine, which was added in China to a powder mix to elevate the protein levels. Melamine will artificially elevate the protein levels. Oh yeah, that one causes kidney failure too. And we have to have tens of thousands of animals die before somebody starts putting the puzzle pieces together and starts asking questions. You know, veterinarians will go to a meeting and they'll say, God, I'm really seeing a lot of kidney failure cases. Are you seeing a lot? Like, what's changed? And we need enough people talking to say, oh, we think there's a problem. And that's why it takes many months and many deaths to find these problems. You know, way back in the 80s, when we first started making canned food for dogs, and well, we started making it long before that, but when we started adding a lot of grains in, we started having cats dying of heart failure, going blind. And then they discovered, oh yeah, cats are obligate carnivores. They need a lot of taurine, or they go into heart failure and they go blind. Oh, we better add taurine to the food. But that's how they discovered it. Enough cats had problems. Then when I first started in practice in the 80s, that was when, I don't know if you have this over there, but Mighty Dog, which was a canned food made for small, finicky dogs. And it was 100% meat. It didn't have a vitamin mineral mix in it. It didn't have calcium added to it. And it was meant to be a topper to put on top of the dry food to make your dogs want to eat it. Well, people said, oh my gosh, my dog loves this so much. Why am I he just leaves the kibble in the bowl, but he likes this stuff. I'll just feed this. And so enough people started feeding this unbalanced, no calcium added food. So high in phosphorus, low in calcium. And we started seeing a lot of dogs with rubber jaw, which is basically their bones start to dissolve because they don't have enough calcium. So all their teeth fall out. And the first thing that dissolves is their lower jawbone. So they end up with no teeth and a floppy lower jaw from low calcium in the food. Well, how did we figure out that they needed calcium added in the food? Oh yeah, we had a bunch of dogs with rubber jaw, but you have to have enough. And I saw it a lot in practice. You know, I didn't know anything about food then. I was like, oh, you're feeding Mighty Dog, must be fine. Yeah, it wasn't fine.
Sure.
It's actually scary if you think about this, that you've got to have so many, and it's tens and thousands of dogs. We just had in South Africa a little while ago a major recall of one of our biggest pet food companies, manufacturers in South Africa, that had across the board, all their pet food, dog and cat food, had to be recalled of a mycotoxin toxicity. And still, the vets involved with this food still goes out and trash healthy, fresh food feeding and make it virtually impossible for people to see what happens behind the scenes in these big pet food companies and dogs dying. It is so scary for me, and from where I'm sitting and I'm thinking, but can't you guys see it? It is so obvious. Just open your eyes and see it. But yeah, that's me, and it's a very passionate topic for me.
The veterinarians refuse, though. I mean, in January of 2024, well, it's actually, January of 24, a friend of mine who runs a Facebook page called Saving Pets One at a Time, her dog was one of the ones that succumbed to a Hill's kidney diet that her dog was put on, and it died from the excess vitamin D. So her dog was put on the diet because its kidneys weren't working very well. And then the diet it was put on actually wrecked the kidneys and the dog died. So she started this Saving Pets One at a Time. And it was to educate people about pet food and to be very vigilant, because she doesn't even own a dog. She just wanted to make sure it never happened to anybody else. And so she contacted me in January 2nd of 24 and said, I have a problem. At that time, her Facebook page had about 30,000 people on it. And she said, I have had over 1,000 posts put on my page from people saying their dogs are eating Purina Pro Plan, and they got a new bag, opened it up. Their dogs didn't want to eat it. They doctored it up a little bit. The dogs ate it. And these dogs, they would come home and it was bloody vomit and diarrhea from one end of the house to the other. And the dogs, some of them were seizuring and a lot of them were dying. And we were seeing it with cats as well. And so she had about 1,000 cases that were reported. And I said, well, clearly something is going on here. We need to warn people. So I went live and warned people and said, something is going on. I don't know what. We actually spent about $20,000 in testing, trying to find what was causing the problem. And we were never able to. But we made a big enough stink and there were enough reports to FDA that people started backing off and at least saying, oh, well, I opened a new bag and my dog doesn't want to eat it. I'm not going to make him eat it. Maybe there's a problem. And we had a lot of rotten food sent to us and it smelled really bad. I don't know what the heck was in there. But I had veterinarians threatening me and saying, you know, how dare you say anything negative about Purina? They've done so much for veterinarians. They spend so much money. They sponsor all of our continuing education. They give us freebies. They give us reduced price on pet food for our own pets. How can you speak out against them? I'm like, how can you not speak out against 1,000 dead pets? Like, how are you that brainwashed? But they are. They absolutely are that brainwashed. And so, you know, and one of my classmates reached out and told me I should not allowed to be a veterinarian anymore because I spoke against a company that we all love. And I'm like, yeah, we don't. Thank you.
It's scary. It's absolutely scary.
Yeah.
A lot of the things that overload our dogs and that's toxic to them and it's hiding in our dogs is not on the ingredient list. So this one is the one part that most pet owners never even thought about. I think it is something that people, it's like almost like that penny drop and you think, oh, but I never thought about this.
Yeah,
so
I'm actually going to speak about
mercury, lead, aluminium, and those toxins and how they build up.
I'm actually going to address part of this in my talk at your event, because there are so many things that our animals are exposed to that we don't even think about, that we're exposed to that we don't think about, that we really should be thinking about. So air fresheners, plug-ins, Teflon coated cooking utensils, candles, so many, any cleaning agents, things that we use in our house, those, unless we are using specifically natural products, like I really like using probiotic products or just using vinegar for cleaning, stuff like that. But these chemical products that we're using, they're exposing us to a lot of bad chemicals that are carcinogens. And in studies comparing humans, dogs, and cats in the same household, they test, they test blood, urine, hair for hundreds of chemicals. And whatever they find in the people, they will find that plus more in the dogs, and it'll be concentrated 5 to 10 times more in the dogs. Cats, it'll be concentrated 15 to 25 times more. The thing is, most of these chemicals and air fresheners and everything, they're heavy and they settle to the floor. Where do your pets spend most of their time? Oh yeah, that would be on the floor. And what do cats do? They lick themselves all the time. And so they're super concentrating these carcinogens. And it is, and like in our drinking water, and even in the pet food, like the heavy metals that you're talking about, depending on the toxins in the soil where the plants are grown. Do you guys use glyphosate spray over there? Probably. I looked it up for Australia. They do. We do here. When we look at animals for glyphosate, we do urine testing for glyphosate. Animals that are raw fed have very little glyphosate or none. Animals that are fed ultra processed food that's filled with grains, their glyphosate levels are very, very high because the grains are sprayed with glyphosate. Shocking. And so, but we don't, and when we test for heavy metals, again, animals that are on high plant-based diets, those plants suck a lot of those heavy metals up through their roots. So like we know rice is commonly contaminated with arsenic. Huge problem. We also know that, there's mercury in vaccines. Like I would love to go get all these mercury laden fillings out of my teeth that I've had my entire life. Wouldn't that be nice to get rid of those? Like we're just exposed to toxins all the time. Some we can control, some we can't control. For instance, they tested all the waterways in Europe for fipronil, which is a flea and tick medication, and all the waterways are contaminated. They tested the hair of children in France, all filled with fipronil. They've tested the hair and feathers in bird nests because we have a lot of songbird babies that are dying in their nests. And that's because their mamas and papas are building nests with hair that is loaded with chemicals. And then, pieces of twigs and sticks and plants that are loaded with chemicals. Like we are destroying our environment. We also know that the metabolites of the neurotoxic pesticides that we give our pets pass out in the stool and urine, and then all those little bugs that break down the stool in the soil, they're all dying too. So what happens when we kill off enough insects that we don't have enough to feed the frogs and the lizards and the birds? Like we're destroying the food chain. And it's all because we don't ever want to find a tick on our dog, or we don't ever want to find a flea, or we want a cheaper way to feed them. Cutting these corners and saying that we're smarter than God and Mother Nature, it's not working out very well for us.
I was asking my husband the other day, when last did we have to clean our windscreen when we were driving more than just from work to just a few kilometers, driving from here 100 kilometers away? And he was quiet for a while. He said, I can't remember when last I ever cleaned my windscreen. And that's not because our gardener does that. It's because it's not needed. I remember as a child, you will go on a road trip, and every few kilometers you will stop and you've got to wash the windscreen with soap and water to get all the bugs off. You don't see bugs on windscreens anymore. And it is actually, you start thinking about it. It is the type of things that we don't think about it. And then when you start thinking about it, you sort of, you get scared because it's got such a huge impact on our planet and on our food chain and everything around.
Absolutely. And, feeding organic food to our pets is a step in the right direction. But frankly, a farm can be organic and be next to a farm that uses chemicals. And if the wind's blowing the right way, guess where it's all going? It's, I grow most of our food. And so everything is organic and I don't use any pesticides. Like people make fun of me because I'm out in my garden hand picking off bugs, which is a little bit crazy. But I don't want to use a bunch of chemicals. And our cattle feed, we ship in. So we're in North Carolina. It's on the East Coast. We're shipping it in from Missouri by the pallet because I want organic food. So it's coming over 1,000 miles because I can't find anybody that makes an organic food that I like that's near me. But, and yes, I'm a little bit crazy and I can do that and I can, take the time to raise my own food. But we started processing our own meat chickens because I'm like, I don't like the meat I can't eat grocery store meat now because I've grown my own. And I'm like, it doesn't even taste anything near. Like I didn't drink milk for 20 years. Pasteurized, homogenized milk was horrible for my gut. Didn't drink milk for 20 years. We have our own cow now. I drink milk multiple times every day. Milk is like my favorite thing in the world. Unpasteurized raw milk is like I make all our own cheese, all our own yogurt. And that's what our dogs get. Our dogs get the organic eggs from our chickens. It makes all the difference in the world. Not everybody can do it. I know we're a little crazy. We kind of set out to do it because I was like, I'm really sick of what's going on with the food industry. And is it a little more expensive to buy organic, fresh made food for your pets? Yes. Are you going to save money on veterinary bills? You betcha.
Yes.
Yes. If you can avoid over-vaccinating them, if you can avoid giving the chemicals, and if you can feed them really high quality, nature-made food, they're going to be so much healthier. Like, you don't get the chronic ear infections. You don't get the chronic allergies. I've got an old dog right now that we adopted. I don't know anything about his history. Came to us blind. He's had one eye removed, and he maybe sees 5% in the eye that he has left. And he bumped his leg running through the door with another dog, and he was limping. And I went, oh, poo. So we took him in to have x-rays done because I wanted to make sure he didn't like really crack something or dislocate something. And when they took x-rays, we got both hind legs. The left hind leg that he hit on the door that he was limping on looked fine on x-ray. The right hind leg had the most horrible hip arthritis. And I went, well, isn't that interesting? Without that x-ray, I never would have known, because he's on a highly anti-inflammatory diet. He's on joint supplements just because he's older. He races around the yard, plays ball, no problems, jumps up and down. And I'm like, I would never know it if I didn't have an x-ray to show it. And, that's kind of what we're looking for. Like, when we feed them correctly, I don't have to give him chronic medications. He doesn't have to be on non-steroidals. He doesn't have to get injections. And God forbid, I would never use Librela. I don't know what it's called there, Barenza, whatever name they're using there. But yeah, we've got some deadly stuff we're giving to our animals that we just need to avoid.
So I've got a question here from one of our listeners. There seems to be a general focus on pain meds when it comes to vets. Medcam, gabapentins, and long-term use of these does seem scary, especially if you want to try have a more holistic health approach for your pets, and if you're sold on feeding raw and things like that. So
yeah. So
what
this
advice?
This is,
I don't know. This is one. How do you?
Well, this is my dog I was just talking about. When we put them on diets that are high in omega-3s, and I would be like, if I had, we have and actually I'm talking about arthritis at your event. There are so many supplements that we can use for these dogs to keep them mobile without having to use those medications. So my breed of dog is Cavalier King Charles Spaniels and English Toy Spaniels. They genetically, most of them have something called syringomyelia, which is a very painful spinal cord disease, and Chiari malformation, which is a very painful base of the brain disease where their skull actually cuts into their brainstem. And so those dogs, that breed, and when I first got into the breed, all of my dogs lived on gabapentin and omeprazole because that is the standard treatment for these dogs to keep them pain-free. And as I got more and more into doing holistic medicine, I said, there must be a better way to do this. And none of my dogs have been on pain medications in years and years and years, because we treat everything now with food, with herbs, with supplements. So I'm a huge fan, and I don't know what you have available in South Africa, but I'm a huge fan of deer antler velvet or elk antler velvet. We use PEA, which is palmitoyl ethanolamide. Great product. Glucosamine, chondroitin supplements, hyaluronic acid supplements, but omega-3 fatty acids are just amazing for these animals, very anti-inflammatory. We want to get lots of antioxidants into their diet, feed them fresh berries, feed them dark leafy greens, eggs, egg yolks in particular. But there's so many things that we can do from a natural standpoint and be able to wean them off of those medications. So gabapentin is very misused. It is specifically for neuropathic pain. So generalized arthritis, gabapentin's used a lot, but it's pretty ineffective. Like, it really doesn't do much. And one of the things that it can do is it can have a sedative effect. So a lot of times our dogs aren't complaining so much. They're also not moving very much because they're pretty sedated. And so we think, oh, he doesn't have pain, but no, really, he's just sedated. Metacam is used a lot in some countries more than others, but it can cause GI ulceration. It can cause kidney failure, occasionally liver problems. Like, one of my dogs, when Rimadyl first came out, which is carprofen, brand new drug. And I said, oh, well, he's a 9-year-old, 100-pound dog. He probably has some arthritis. He was a pretty quiet dog. I put him on Rimadyl, and suddenly he was leaping over the sofa, racing through the fields, chasing the deer. And I went, oh, you weren't laying around because you're old. You were laying around because you hurt, and now you don't hurt. So I thought Rimadyl was a miracle drug. I was working in emergency medicine at the time, and one of my technicians in my daytime clinic also put her dog on Rimadyl. He died within 2 weeks of kidney failure. He was a Springer Spaniel. Yeah, it made him feel great, and he died. My dog that I put on it died a year later of liver failure, and he never should have been put on it, but they didn't tell us at the time, oh yeah, by the way, watch their liver enzymes. And in the emergency clinic I was working in, within the first 6 months, I saw a lot of dogs that came in with ruptured intestinal ulcers, and they die. Like, you can't treat them. And so this is before I was into holistic medicine, but I was getting a really good education of side effects. And so this is one of those things that any new drug that comes out, it's tested on a couple hundred dogs if we're lucky. And the real test subjects are your pets. When the drugs start getting used, and now we've dispensed 5 million doses, now the side effects start getting reported. The biggest problem is only about 1% of side effects get reported. So, if you have a drug like Librela, where, we've got 6,000 or 7,000 deaths in the first 3 years, that's 1% being reported. So how many dogs and cats are actually dying that are not reported, that the veterinarian said, no, it wasn't from that, couldn't have been from that, because that's the response that you get a lot of times. I mean, if the problem doesn't occur within about 3 minutes after giving the drug, the veterinarian very commonly will say, not related. And so with the neurotoxic pesticides that we're giving our animals, they might not start having seizures till 3 weeks later or 3 months later. But then once they start having seizures, doesn't matter if you stop the drug, they've got seizures for life because we've scrambled their brains. But the veterinarians are very reluctant to say that the two are related, even though FDA sent out a warning letter to veterinarians saying, hey, this class of drugs seems to be causing some neurologic problems. Be on the lookout. And yet we still get denial. It's like, you've got to be kidding. I think part of it is, as the veterinarian who dispensed it, you don't want to admit that you dispensed something that caused a problem. It's like, oh man, I don't want to deal with that guilt. I get it. But if we don't start reporting these things and we don't start looking for them, we're not going to see them.
No, and I don't think a lot of pet parents don't.
It's very sad, hey?
No, it's very sad. And I really don't think a lot of pet parents actually realize or add one and one to get two. They add one and one, they get four type of scenarios. It's all about education and awareness, and it's really crazy, scary stuff.
Yep.
We are,
but Rita, last one. That's why we have such a wonderful event coming up. The African Pet Health Summit. I just love the fact that it is making this information available to the average pet parent, because it's so sad. I'm listening to you, and I was that person before. I didn't know. I just accepted the advice, and every one of us, I think Dr. Nick said it so well. We were all kind of misled, and now we know the truth. And I feel like this evangelist, we must just go out and just tell everyone, just tell them whether they want to listen or they don't want to listen, because it needs to stick, because dogs and cats, our pets are dying, and it's breaking our hearts. And we don't know, we think we're doing everything we can do. And
well,
they're
sure.
still dying.
You go to the veterinarian and they're like, oh no, we need to do these vaccines every year to protect him so he doesn't get parvo, lepto, distemper, whatever. Okay, great. They told me I have to do that. I have to do that. Oh, I have to use these pesticides because God forbid my dog would get bitten by a tick or a flea. By the way, most of the pesticides, the flea or tick has to bite your dog in order for them to get the chemical and die. So yeah, it's not really preventing that anyway. But oh no, these drugs are very safe here, no problems. And it's up to us to start questioning, and maybe you have to, it's not a conspiracy theory if it turns out to be the truth.
And many things are turning out to be the truth at the moment.
Yeah. Okay, guys, just before we go, and Judy, Dr. Judy, we are absolutely beyond privileged to have you visiting South Africa in September. If there's one thing that I have learned, that nothing replaces being in the room. Reading about your dog's health is one thing, but sitting down face to face with people, like-minded people, asking the questions, and walk away with a real plan and a real solution, and you hear it straight from the horse's mouth. That's where things actually does make a change. So please tell our listeners about you coming to visit us in South Africa and why they simply cannot miss this one.
Well, me getting to South Africa is a little bit crazy because we planned my schedule for the year, and I planned 2 trips to the West Coast 2 weeks apart. And then South Africa got squeezed in the middle between them. So I have to take a red eye home from the West Coast, get to the airport here in North Carolina at 6 in the morning, and then be on a plane at 3 in the afternoon to go to South Africa. So I really, really wanted to come, and my poor husband hates to fly. So this is like torture to him, by the way. And then a few weeks later, we're going to Australia. So it's a torture month, but I'm really excited. First of all, we all have those bucket lists of places we want to go and things we want to see. And Africa's been on my bucket list for a long time. And because my schedule was crazy when Retha first called, I was like, we'll put it off till next year. We'll put it off till next year. And I don't know what ended up changing my mind that I was like, we're just going to be crazy and do this. And I have to tell you, we've been flying a lot lately, and every single flight has been delayed or canceled or changed. And I'm like, oh my God, this like, I hope we're getting this all out of our system now. But I'm really excited to come. And we hold an event, and we do it every 2 years because it takes us that long to put an event together. At our event, I don't know how many people are coming to yours, but we have 500 attendees and then 100 vendors. So it's about 700 people. And there is nothing like being in a room with 500 other pet owners who don't look at you cross-eyed when you say, I feed raw and I don't vaccinate. And then you get to exchange ideas. And if you're having an issue with something, I guarantee there's 10 other people in the room who are also dealing with the same thing or have dealt with the same thing. It's so cool to meet and interact. Like the people who came to our last event, they're like, we want it to be longer and we want you to have one every year. And we're like, we can't. But it is so different. Like last year when we did ours, we offered virtual event for people who couldn't come in person. And they said they got a lot out of it, but it was very different than being in person. Mm-hmm. And so this time we're not even offering the virtual because it is so different to be in that room and also to be able to speak one-on-one with the speakers. Ask questions, kind of rub elbows, get books signed, whatever it is. And there's nothing that each of us enjoys more than telling other people about our pets. It's like, the person who gets out their big long line of photos of their kids. It's like, I've got 4,000 pictures of my dog on my phone. I don't have any of my kids. But that's kind of it. You're in a room with that kind of people who, they can answer questions for you. You learn from every person who's there. And, when you have a question for the speaker, you can ask it instead of reading it in a book going, wonder what they were talking about there. I really didn't understand that. So for me, there's nothing like, that's why I'm traveling so much this year. There's nothing like an in-person event. I really enjoy them. And I see how much people get out of them. We've got a couple of followers that go to every event I'm speaking at. Like, they're flying all over the country to hear me speak over and over and over and over. Thank God everybody asked for a different topic, so they are hearing different things. But this year's crazy because I had like 20 different talks I had to prepare. I'm still working on it. It's been a little nuts, but to me, it's just very important, that education component for people. It's all about empowerment. And the more education you have, the more empowered you are. And getting that education in person, there's nothing like it.
I'm looking extremely. I've been privileged to be at 2 seminars in the States where you were a speaker, and I am so excited to have you as our guest here. And I want to say to all the pet parents out there that has not booked yet, you've got to book. You are gonna regret this so much. Yeah.
We heard that from so many people with our event. Oh, I wish I'd gone in person. It would have been so much better in person. There's just nothing like it. It's pretty cool. And I will say the same thing. When I was first learning all this, going to in-person events and meeting the speakers and learning, I mean, there's nothing to compare to that in person.
Not at all. So, Antonette, you've got any more questions, or we need to wrap it up?
I think we need to wrap it up. Yeah, because if we start again, we could go for another hour. But no, I'm so excited to meet everyone and to see everyone at the summit. And yeah, I'm like counting the sleeps now. When is it? September?
Almost like that.
Yeah.
I'm counting how many trips I have before then.
Yeah, I think people will be very rude if they don't attend, because you're making a huge effort and taking lots of flights to come to South Africa, so they better get their asses in here.
And I think we get there at like 5:30 in the afternoon on Monday, and then you have us on a flight at 6 o'clock Tuesday morning. So it's like more culture.
It's gonna be hectic, but it's gonna be worth it, I promise you. So, Dr. Judy, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for sparing us in the middle of your day some time to chat to us, and just let's discuss a few interesting things. If there's something that I want to leave to everybody is, listen, guys, you don't need to change everything overnight. As long as you start lifting the load as soon as possible. We're here, we can assist you, and pop the messages, and we will see you next week.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Good night.
Bye-bye, everybody. Have a nice week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.